Let's do it! Hello fellow artists, I'm Molly, your watercolor whisperer. Whether you're a complete beginner or looking to refine your skills, you've come to the right place. As an experienced watercolor instructor, I live to paint and I teach to inspire. In today's video, I show you my favorite beginner supplies, how to make your first marks on paper, and we'll cover everything you need to know to kickstart your watercolor adventure. Whether you dream of capturing landscapes, florals, or simply expressing your inner world on paper, this video is your first step towards realizing those dreams. Grab your brushes, unleash your imagination. Let's get into the world of watercolor painting together. Let's do it! Okay, so today I'm going to be using the Strathmore watercolor paper, cold pressed, 140 pound. Now the pound, that refers to the thickness of the paper. 140 pound is a pretty standard weight and thickness. This booklet is only $5 when I got it, at the time I got it. What I love it for is just practicing my marks with my brushes. I did do some swatches on some colors that I was working on a project. Then again, I just practice with different shapes and sizes, and I don't have to worry about using expensive paper or anything like that. I can just play around. This was a test painting that I did for one of my YouTube videos. So this is what we're going to use today, and you can kind of see the thickness of it. It's pretty thick, 140 pound. That holds a lot of water. So let's get started. So most watercolorists like to work on an angle. This my husband made for me. It's not that big and it has just a bit of an angle. I saw a cool trick from another artist on YouTube. These are door stoppers. And what you can do is just put these down, right? And you can put your paper right there. So if you're not using a notebook, you can tape your paper down to a board like this. This is just a plywood that I got at Home Depot. I asked them to cut it to a certain size. This is maybe a 8 by 10. And I do a lot of 5 by 7 sizes, so I wanted a little bigger than that. And you can take some tape and tape down your paper, and that also gives you a nice border. Here's an example of a nice border of a landscape that I did recently. Just gently take off the tape and voila. So here we go. I've got my Cotman watercolors here, 2 glasses of water, my wet sponge, and my brush. This is a size 8 silver black velvet. I especially like it for swatches because it has this tip, this nice point to it that is great for kind of doing hard edges, which is kind of nice for swatches. A great thing to do if you don't have a spray bottle, don't worry about it, but you can just kind of tap in a little water. It's great to activate your activate your watercolors before you start. It just helps so you don't have to use your brush as much to kind of get it activated and dig into it there. Okay, so here we go. This is cobalt blue. I already had some activated here, so you can see I'm just gonna add a little water, and I like where the consistency is. It's not too thick, not too thin, which will give it its kind of true color. I do want it a little bit on the thick side because I do want to see how dark it can get. So now I'm just gonna go and just do a square. There is this great notebook that already has the squares laid out for you, and I'll show this to you, but this is not a necessity if you're a beginner. This is a fantastic painter's color diary, and they have the boxes already for you and then the lines so you can put in the names, and it is just fantastic. I do a lot of swatching, and for me, it's definitely worth the time saver, and it's actually really good quality paper. So I thought it was definitely worth the extra expense, but don't even worry about it if you're a beginner. What you need to worry about now is working with your brush and the colors and the water. Oh, now I did this first square. Now if I want to do a little gradation here, I rinse, I tap off just a little bit of extra water, and then I can activate and do a little more gradation. Now, this is a really good lesson because see how I let it dry for just a second. Get it in focus there. I let it dry for just a second, and you can see the line that happened there, right there. So it's important that when you do something like this, you want to do the whole square or the whole area at once, and then you either leave it, let it dry, or you have to move kind of quick. You add water, and then you can do a little gradation. Then you have to leave it, otherwise you'll get off that funky line again. So that's a good lesson right there. Now I'm going to rinse my brush, and since I'm going into the blue, I don't really need to do the clean water, but I did anyway. So now I'm going to go into, this is ultramarine blue. And again, I'm going to just kind of get it pretty thick, like a thick color. And right next to my other blue. And now this is a warm blue. You don't need to worry about any of that right now. Warm or cools. Now I rinse, I scrape off a little excess water, and then I go and do a little gradation. Now I got a lot of water on there, so that's where my paper towel comes in. I can rinse my brush, blot it on my sponge, blot it on my paper towel, and I can pick up a little bit of that water. And if I want to create more of a gradation, I can do that, but I should really start at the top so it's all even. So there we go. There's that one. And if you want to pick up, say you're like, oh, I don't want that much blue down there at the bottom. Rinse with your clear water, get your brush as clean as you can, and pat it dry, and then you can pick up some of the paint and basically lift and get some of the white of the paper back. Now what I'm going to do is go with the reds. I'm going to do a warm red first, which is my cadmium red, which is right here. It's kind of an orangey red. And I'll put it right here. It's a little easier to see. Okay, might want a little more water. Just going into my clean water just because I know I'm not going to get it that dirty. Okay, a little cadmium red. And now I dip, scrape a little water. Oh, see, that's a lot of color on there. Scrape a little water off. Blot with the sponge, and then I can blend. So this is just a great learning experience, and then you can go from the top down and keep it blend. So this is all about learning. You don't have to make them even, make them perfect. If you want, that's fine. Totally up to you. But for me, it's just about having fun, being loose, and discovering the colors. So that's what I like to do. Now I'm going to do a cool red, which is a Lazarian crimson, which is kind of a bluish red. You can see them right there next to each other. You can see the difference. And again, this is why you want to kind of wet your pans before you go into it with your brush, because especially if you have an expensive brush, you don't want to kind of ruin your brush and keep trying to activate the paint with your brush. So sometimes I use an old brush and get all my paints really activated and creamy, and then I'll go in and paint with my good brush. Now this is the Alizarin Crimson. This is a cool red. It's a very pretty color. Alizarin Crimson is used a lot in watercolor paintings, landscapes, pretty much a lot of paintings. Now that was too much water, okay? I kind of did that on purpose because I wanted you to see, okay, too much water, that's okay. It's a little puddly. What I'm gonna do is I rinse my brush and kind of dab it on the paper towel, and then I'm just gonna pick it up. And pick it up and dab, pick it up and dab. And if you're like, okay, it's still not even, I still really don't like it. All right, well, let's just grab some more. We know there's plenty of water on there. We'll just start from the top and work our way down and make it so it's even. Go in there and dab it, and there you go. So there's always a way with watercolors to fix watercolors. It may have a reputation of not being very fixable, but it actually is. And that's one thing that I found out. Once I found that out, I was like, whoa, this is great. Okay, so now I'm not going to do all the swatches, all the colors, because you've kind of got the idea of how that works. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to go over some of the brushes. I have some of my favorites here. This is again by Silver, Black Velvet. This is oval. And I'm going to switch my colors, my water here. We'll use some clean water. Now you can see what a wonderful point it makes. And it is just so great for doing landscapes or, you know, even flowers. You want to get around a certain flower, a certain edge. It's just a great fun brush to work with. This is one of my first brushes. You already know about the Silver Black Velvet, the size 8. This is the, I think this is their round one. If you want more of a snap, so a snap, you can see how kind of firm this brush is. I'll go over the snap with you in a second here. This is a size 8 round Princeton Elite. This is a Princeton Angle. This is their shader and angle brush. This is great for all kinds of effects, hair to lift, color, and for fine lines. It's just a great tool to have. Then you'll need a small brush. This is the Rosemary and Company have some fantastic durable brushes. And this is their spotter. This is 0. This is their spotter. Not the most super fine point, but it gets the job done. And they do have other brushes that have a finer point, but I have used this one for details so much. And like I said, it's really durable and sturdy. So this is a great one. I definitely recommend going to Rosemary and Company and check out their brushes. Now that we've done some swatches, you've got the idea of how to do them. So once you've finished all your swatching, then you can start playing around with your brush strokes. Right now I'm going to use a round Princeton size 8. This is a burnt sienna, such a pretty color, another color that you're going to use a lot in watercolor. What I'm going to do is just show you some of the marks that you can make with this brush. Now, what I was saying earlier about this being a snap brush is that it pops back up right into place. It holds water, but it keeps its shape. It's hard to explain. You kind of have to feel it. What I did here was I pressed down, I pressed up, then I press down again. And that's a good practice just so you can see the shape of the brush. Also, if you hold the brush straight up and down, or even on an angle like that, you can get a pretty fine line. So an example of a snap, say, is when you want to do short, quick strokes like that. Maybe a petal, maybe a leaf, and it comes right back up. And you can add a little tail, that sort of thing. Then maybe a little horizontal to see how much coverage you can get with the brush. And also play around with how long the water lasts on your brush too. So I'm going to use the same color but with a different brush, and you can just kind of see the different marks that it makes. This is burnt sienna again, and we'll do it right next to each other. So drop there. Now this has a real pointy, this is the one that has a real pointy tip to it. So you'll see up, down, up, down. You'll see how different, much cleaner edges and a lot pointier. So I'll do that again since I did the other one twice. So down, up, down, up. Yeah, just different. It's just a different. This one, because it has such the point, you can really get a nice line here. Maybe for some tree branches really quickly, or some tree branches or something like that. Then this for little petals or leaves. Leaves are great if you're looking for a great point for leaves or petals. This is a good one too. Now to get a large area, this holds a lot of water and you get a nice even stroke. Okay, now we're going to one of my favorite brushes. I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue here. I'm going to load it up on my brush. And this is definitely great for larger areas, even landscapes and that sort of thing. So I think what we'll do today is just kind of do maybe some water or ocean. And kind of, there we go. You can see how interesting the marks are. And if I want to do a finer edge, there we go, we can do that. And if this, because it's so pointy, a pointy tip, if you want to do something quick with a fine line, you can do that as well too. Nice point there. You could almost just make a flower or some leaves. Interesting flower and leaves with this point. To me, that's the definition of playing, experimenting, getting to know your brushes, getting to know your colors. Now let's move on and make some fun flowers. Okay, so I'm back. I've got my clean water, paint, and I'm ready to go paint a beautiful echinacea. You may want to first slightly sketch in the echinacea. So just draw like an oblong circle, just like this. Just kind of go around, draw a little oblong circle. Then, and you might want to practice on a separate piece of paper or something. Then do 2 hooks, 2 lines with a hook. So this is a hook, and here's a hook. Okay, another line with a hook up front, up on top, another line with a hook up on top. Another hook and another hook. So when you do on a scratch piece of paper, then when you go onto your painting, you're ready to go. Hook, line with a hook, a line with a little hook, and there we go. So now this helps us just drawing that in so we don't have one huge petal over here, one small petal over here, which I have done many times. Okay, so I've got my ultramarine blue. I added a little alizarin crimson, and I have a real pretty purple. I'm going to add a touch of water and get it nice and thin. I don't want the color too thick. My brush is loaded with color. It's full of water and pigment. Now what I'm going to do is hold my brush at about a 45-degree angle, okay? And start up at the top and go right with first with the little hook, go straight and then a little hook, go straight and then another little hook. Okay, and then we go back, straight with a little hook and a little hook. Little hook and a little hook. Now you don't have to have your pencil marks as dark as I have mine. I have mine pretty dark because of the camera so you can see them. And they don't have to be as big as mine. There we go. So we got some hooks there. Then what we're going to do is add a little color in the middle. So I have, this is, what is this? Oh yeah. I'm going to do my burnt sienna that was over here and just do a touch of that. And I don't mind if it touches into the petals. I think it's kind of a nice look. Now while that's drying, I'm going to go and get a little bit more of the alizarin crimson, that's that cool red color, and make it a little more kind of a reddish purple. And I'm going to do a second layer, but that's it. I'm not going to do a lot more. I'm just going to do the second layer, and then whatever brush you have, you can just do your hooks, and maybe I'll go down the middle. Now with my pointy brush, I can go down the middle and do like a little vein if I want to, if that works out. Having two different colors or two different values is really makes the artwork. And now I've rinsed that out. I'm going to do a touch of brown in the center. And a touch of the alizarin crimson in the center. And just drop it right in there. And I don't mind if it touches. If you want it to look a little more watercolor-ishy, that's a word, that's official, that's a word. You can add some more water and then we'll just let it dry. If you want to pick it up, if it got too watercolor-ishy, you can hold your brush down and blot up some color. And this is, I believe this is Hooker's green. Oh no, sap green, which is a yellow green. I'm going to put it right there. I have a little brown right there. I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of brown. And now, because my brush has this great point, this is where I'm going to do. And you can draw the line first if you want. There we go. What you do is, this is where the practice of the brush comes in, where you take your brush and you start thin, and then you slowly press down so you get a thicker line. So I'll do that again. Let's turn it over. You slowly, you have a point. I'm pressing very lightly. Then I'm pressing down a little bit more, and you can see the bend on the brush. See the angle on the brush. I'm to get the wider line. And if I want it a little thinner up here, just bring it up like that. So that's basically what I did here. Then before it dries too much, I'm going to just do a little leaf. There we go. And if I wanted to add a little brown here before it dries too much, so it's not such a flat color, such a flat green, which I kind of prefer. There. So you can see how when I added that water here, that really, it bled, it ran down into the petals, which I actually kind of like. It's kind of fun. But if you don't want to do that, let's do another one that's a little bit cleaner, we'll call it. A little bit looser style. So let's do another one right here. I'm going to do some cobalt blue. We'll do a different blue this time. A touch of alizarin crimson in there. So I get a violet, get a pretty violet. I'm going to add a lot of water. There we go. So it's a very soft, pretty violet, very soft, pretty blue. Okay, this time I'm not gonna do my sketch. I'm just gonna kind of go quickly. Oh, we need a little more blue. Went a little too late. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps me make more videos for you. Thank you. So now I'm using this brush for some great marks, right? That's a really nice mark. I love that. And then more in the front. I'm having the petals get a little closer to each other. I'm just kind of doing some fun, not really thinking about it too much. Maybe a petal behind there in the back. Then let's see. I think I'll grab a little more red so I can get a little deeper violet. And there you go. This is just fun practice. Okay, then rinse your brush. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit of this yellow. A little bit of burnt sienna, just any color will do, honestly. Any kind of a yellowy color. Get a nice consistency that I want, and then I'll just do a little half moon. Half moon. Okay, and then I'm gonna add a touch of brown in there while it's still wet. Just like that. And then if it bleeds into the petals, that's fine with me. Now I've got my brown and I'm going to do a little green here. And here we go. Just gonna, let's have it. There we go. And that's kind of a more looser, I would say. Not as messy as that one. Now, if you do go back and do some color in here, you'd have to wait, honestly, till it's completely dry. Otherwise, you're going to get this cauliflower effect. So this is how you get, this is the cauliflower effect, which some people don't want. If you do not touch this until it dries, you won't get that effect. Okay, I think I'm going to do a more violet, like a more red pink color. So I'm going to grab a lot of the alizarin crimson, get a lot of that on my brush, and here I go. There's one petal. There's another petal. Just get one over to the side there. Okay. And I'm going to add a little burnt sienna there. And then a little brown. Then let's do a blue. So we have the two values kind of right next to each other, so we didn't mix them together. It's kind of like you're mixing on the paper. Just kind of a fun way to do your watercolors too. Then, gotta get our stem in there. Let's get a little green. Okay, I'm gonna go with a little green and brown. Oh, so you're not really digging the blue there? A little too strong? You can just add a little water. Kind of fun to do a little. All right, fellow artists, I finished my cone flowers. Here they are. I would love to see yours. I have a Facebook group called Joyful Watercolors, and you can post there, comment. I would love to see your flowers. If you have any questions, you can leave them there as well. Okay, on to the next painting. This is going to be a study on values. Values are really important for realism and depth in a painting, drawing, anywhere in art. Values are where it's at. The mountains are all the same color. I used Payne's gray. So this is with a lot of water, middle, a little bit less water, and then not very much water at all. A nice creamy mixture. I'm going to demonstrate this for you, and we'll talk about values right now. All right, so now that we've done our swatches, we've played around with the brushes, and we made some beautiful flowers. Now we're going to make some beautiful mountains. And this study is important because it's going to show you the values. And values are the difference between really the light color, right? The same color, but it's with more water, okay? So that's a light value, and a darker value is the same color, but with less water. So you have your darker value here, you have your lighter value here. So what we're gonna do is do the lighter value for the mountains in the background, right? For the distant mountains, I should say. Then the darker value for the mountains that are closest to us. So I'm going to do a super light sketch. I'll make the lines a little darker than I normally would just for the camera. But you don't, this is a study. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't even need to make the ridges on the mountains. So we're going to do one long mountain, okay? And we should probably get our horizon in here first. So just say this is the horizon. All right, we'll do some grass here. Okay, the bottom is the horizon. Here's a one of the bigger mountains right here. Okay, then we're gonna have a small mountain right in front. Okay, that mountain is going to be the closest to us, okay, to the viewer. Then we have a couple mountains over here that are a little more in the distance. And we can do some peaks maybe on this one just to make it a little more interesting. maybe a little peak on this mountain just to make it a little more interesting. I decided to do some little peaks there. I'm going to just take my kneaded eraser and erase that. Now you really don't want to erase too much on your watercolor paper just because, you know, it's not, you don't want any kind of residue that's going to affect the water on your paper. I'm going to just use one color. This is Payne's Gray, which is a bluish tint. And you notice I'm using a different brush. This is the silver 3/4 inch silver black velvet oval. And this has that really fun pointy tip on it. So that'll be fun when I do the little peaks and valleys. So the mountains in the distance, I'm going to do the wet on wet technique just because that will kind of ensure that the color won't be too dark. Because again, I want it nice and light, even though this was just really watered down Payne's Gray. But it's kind of fun to do a wet on wet technique. It just actually makes it a little easier to control where the pigment is going. With clean water, and it doesn't matter if some gets in here because this is going to be a little darker and it's going to cover the ones in the background. So you'll see. All right, so now I've got majority of all that pretty wet. Oh, you can see I missed a spot. You gotta hold it different in the light, right? You gotta kind of tip it around. Now I've got my Payne's Gray, and it's kind of a strong color. I'm using the Winsor Newton Payne's Gray. It's kind of a strong pigment, so you don't need much. And I activated it, meaning I sprayed water on it first. Here we go. I got it watered down a little bit. Plus I have water on my paper, so I know I'm not going to get it too dark. This is all about the color. It's not about the shape or anything else. This is just, I want to go over the color, the values with you. Okay. Maybe a little technique on how I'm applying it, but other than that, and let's see, let's bring this little peak up. We can tilt it so we can have maybe a little darker color on the peaks. So when it dries a little darker, would kind of be nice. There we go. Okay, so we're going to let that dry. It's drying, and what I'm doing is kind of using a tissue. This is a fun effect. It kind of gives it a little misty look. When the paint is kind of like halfway dry, you can pick up a little bit with your tissue and then just kind of get, pick up a little bit of the paint for the white of the paper, and you get kind of like a nice little misty effect and a little texture. So it's kind of fun to do. Okay, so while that is drying, I'm going to do the horizon line, and I just mixed a little bit of sap green, just a touch of yellow, and I'm just going to get a little horizon line in there, just some green. Now this is dry, so what I'm going to do is, since this is a little closer than this mountain, I'm going to do this mountain a little darker. So that means I'm going to add a little more color. I'm not going to wet it first because I want it a little darker, but not too dark. If you want to take your paper, your little scratch paper, and say, okay, I want to try to get right in the middle of these two colors. I'm going to try to get right in the middle. That's a little too much. So I'm going to add water. That looks good. So that's right in the middle. So that's a middle value. You have your light, your middle, and your darker value. Well, that's basically what art is all about. It's all about values. So now that I have that color ready to go and that's dry, I'm going to go right in and go over this one a little bit to cover the edge and get that value in there. And then we have another mountain. Just fill it in. Okay, and we can put a little peak in there if we want. So I'm going to grab a little more pigment and maybe even a little less water, not as much water. And this is where the practice comes in, figuring out your water ratio, right? Water to brush ratio. And before it dries, I'm going to just do a couple little ridges there. And it's okay that make them a little dark. And there we go. So we have a nice middle value mountain. And we can do the same thing that I did with the tissue. Dab a little tissue when it's kind of almost dry. I'm going to tilt it so some of the paint gets on the edge of the ridge of the mountain. Actually, while this green is still a little wet, I'm going to go ahead and use a brush. Now this is a wet brush, but I'm going to squeeze it out, or I'm going to kind of squeeze out the excess moisture. And while my green horizon, my grass here is still wet, I'm going to lift up some color. Well, it might be a little too dry. I'm going to lift up some color and maybe just get some shadows, some grass effects, so it's not so one color, so it's not so flat. You can play around with something like that. If you want to put a little grass in there, little suggestion of grass, you can kind of make, or texture, you could do something like this. But this is another technique when the paint is about halfway dry. You can do fun techniques like this. Of course, you can always add some browns in there if you want. And this is all just experimenting. Let's get a little extra color in there, but don't make it too hard because this is really about the mountain, the value on the mountains. So we're just going to leave that. Now while we have this second mountain that's about halfway dried, so I'm taking my tissue and I'm going to just kind of lift it up a little bit and lighten it, and that actually creates another value, right? So I just lightened it up a little bit. Now I'm going to let that completely dry before I do the big mountain. All right, so we have both mountains are dry. I've got the grass is dry right in this area. So now I'm going to do the big mountain. And the big mountain is about the same value as this one, but because I don't want them to blend together, I'm going to make it a hair darker, just a little darker. So that's a good challenge. So this is the same value. This is a medium value. So now what I'm going to do is get in between these two. I should have left some more room. I'm going to get in between these two. This is the same color. This is Payne's Gray, okay, which is a really pretty blue, got a blue tint to it. And let's see what happens. That looks pretty dark. Now, I could make this value darker. In fact, I probably should, because this and this, I probably, you know what I could do is just do 2 layers instead of 1. To get this one really dark, I could do 2 layers. So, and that is just a drop that dropped in there when it was drying. So that's what a little cauliflower. That's a perfect example of cauliflower effect. What I'm going to do is go right over it, and now I have a super dark value. So that's pretty nice. That's actually what I want for the mountain that's closest. I think I'm happy with my middle value. Let's see one more time. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, so here we go. Just gonna start up at the top. Get kind of a fun peak there. Another peak. Oh, that wasn't really a peak. Another peak. And go all the way down and go over these mountains if you want. Kind of gives it a nice smooth look. You can kind of cover those edges. And we can go a couple more peaks, make it interesting. Got the nice pointy brush and go all the way down. Then you can practice your edging here. You go right up to the grass, your horizon line, and you kind of want to work fast because this is a big space and we don't want this to start drying out. So we want to just kind of fill it in right away. Add a little bit more because see how it's starting to dry right there? But that's okay because I want the tops a little darker. So, and I'm going to get my edging here. And let's go up here. And you got to kind of work fast. So there we go. We got our middle mountain in. So now what I'm going to do is tilt it. Okay, and I'm going to add just a touch more because I want the crests, right, the peaks, to be a little darker. And I'm going to definitely pick up with some tissue because I think it's a little too dark. So I'm going to definitely pick up some tissue, pick up some color with tissue, blah. And there we go. Just trying to make a little interesting peak there. Stop while I'm ahead. Okay. And let's just, there. All right, so I'm keeping it tilted. I have it tilted about, kind of hard to see on camera, but I have it tilted about, I mean, you could go 90 degree, right? Just all the way because of the paint is not going to go, it's not going to go any farther than where I put the water because all this is dry. So I can tilt it 90 degree and really get it to move. You can kind of see it starting to move there, which is nice because that gives it a little texture, gives it a little depth too. It's another value, right? So I'm just grabbing a clean tissue, and in the reference photo I'm using, there's a lot of fog. So the fog is really light down here by the horizon. So I'm just going to kind of lighten it right up, and I get this nice middle value. And I'm kind of tapping, just tapping, and that's giving me a little texture too. I think actually I'm going to kind of do this just to stimulate some fog, and I'm not going to make it real even. Just gonna, because nothing in nature is even. Nothing in nature is perfect. Okay, I think that's probably it. There. Now, that's going to dry a lot later, so I'm going to let that dry. So there we go. Okay, I'm going to let that dry and then do our final mountain. Okay, here we go. So our third mountain is dry. Yay! All the mountains are dry, especially right in here. It's dry because I'm going to be going over with my brush. So I want to make sure that area is nice and dry. So you can see now I have a pretty dark, and my color here, it's still the same color, Payne's Gray, same color. And it's a little creamier now. I don't have as much water in there. My brush is loaded with it, okay? Just loaded with the color. And now I'm going for this value color. I may have to do 2 coats. I most likely will to get that color because this color has 2 coats on it. So I may have to do 2 coats, but let's go for it. While I have my brush is wet and I have the color I like, I'm also going to maybe first do a few little points for some trees. Okay, just a couple little tree points. Don't have to do this if you don't want to. And then let's just go right over. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to do 2 layers, which is fine. Then I'm gonna go right on my horizon. And it actually is a lot lighter on the horizon too because of the fog. So I'll be lifting this up with my tissue. But I do want to get some of these the trees up in there. There we go. Okay, so now, kind of quickly, I think I might be happy with this color. I think it's going to be dark enough. I wasn't quite sure, but I think it's going to be dark enough for our last value. I'm going to take a little bit, just blot a little bit, and at an angle so it's not perfect. Just take up a little color and try to simulate a little fog there. Like it. So you can play around a little bit. That's the only way you're going to learn, is to play around a little bit. While our third mountain here is drying a little bit, I thought it might be fun to add a little sky. So what I'm going to do is actually turn it over. You don't have to do this. You don't have to turn it over if you don't want. I'm going to do a quick wet on wet, and because I have this nice pointy brush, I'm going to go right up to the edge of the mountain there, but it's not going to get in my mountain, the blue sky color, because I didn't put the water there. Now I'm going to take a little cobalt blue, just a little bit, just for a suggestion of a sky. And now that it's wet, I'm going to add a little bit of blue, and then I'm actually going to add a little water to it. See if I can blot it just a little bit at the bottom. It still seems pretty wet. I'm just gonna lighten it a touch at the bottom, try to get that misty effect. Okay, fellow artists, so here we go. Everything's dry now, and we take off our tape. The fun part, seeing the really pretty white border. Here we have all our different values. This is today's lesson is about values. So you have your lightest value, the mountain in the background. You have your light to medium value is your second mountain. Then you have your middle value, which is your middle mountain. And then the last mountain is your darkest value. So darkest meaning, we've got the ridge, the edges, those are just like some little trees there. Since it's dry, if you want to make it even a little darker, since it dried a lot lighter there, we can just go right over it. I probably took off too much. hope you do the study. Like I said, it's really important, and definitely play around with the tissue effect because that's really fun. All right, fellow artists, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. It really helps me make more videos for you. Thank you.